What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and I'm not gonna lie, even for me, I've got a little extra pep in my step today, and that's because I am so incredibly excited to share this video with you. So first and foremost, you know I love this data set, right? When I'm looking for things that give us indicators to what's going on at the macro level of the hobby, this video is it. We're going to get the actual grading data from the big four grading companies, PSA, SGC, Beckett, and then CGC, right? And then we're going to double click down into PSA, because if you look at the graphs down below, you'll see that PSA's grading volume is so high and everybody else's is so low. PSA grading volume gives us these awesome views of the most graded cards, the most graded individual cards, the most graded sets, the most graded characters. We're going to look at gem rates by era, by different company. Like, there is so much important information in this video. I get incredibly excited about it every single month. Now, as excited as I get, 2024 has not been a great year in terms of grading volume and grading trends in the TCG space. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It has been directionally opposite of what we have seen in the past. It has been downward in the right, and it just hasn't been looking great. Now, you can pontificate on why that's happening. You can give all kinds of different excuses. You can say because the grading, or you can just say the card quality has been poor, not a lot of excitement in Scarlet and Violet, yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? The direction has been negative. However, last month we came into a month where things started to move in the right direction, and I got really excited, and I had a whole lot of eggs in the basket of saying, listen, I really hope August gives us similar results, and August has absolutely blown the roof off. I am so incredibly excited. I'm so incredibly pumped. And I think that there's a lot of good things going on in the hobby right now that we all should be really excited about as collectors and investors. And we're going to see just a high level view of that now. But again, so many cool things to talk about. So first and foremost, just at a macro level, PSA overall, all different grading things considered, not just TCG, but ball sports and everything else considered, they set a new record last month with almost 1.4 million cards being graded. And you see that graph there on the left. I mean, that is just incredible. When you look at PSA's overall grading volume, going back to January of 2022 all the way till now, it has been such a steady climb. PSA is doing it right. It is the number one grading company in the hobby. Doesn't mean you have to love it, doesn't mean you have to prefer it, and it doesn't mean that it will remain number one forever. But at least right now, there is no arguing it is number one in the hobby as it stands. It's so much number one that we have to pull PSA out. And if you look at the middle graph right there, that is going to show you where SGC, CGC, and Beckett have been in terms of grading volume over the last couple years as well. Now, SGC and CGC, they got a lot of momentum. Look at those graphs. I mean, really, over the last 18 months, SGC and CGC has been performing really well. They have seen their grading volume increase. They're starting to get a foothold on things. It'll be interesting because PSA has acquired SGC to see how those two companies merge moving forward is going to, just going to give PSA even more of a say in the hobby. And I'm not a huge fan of that. I am desperately dying for another grading company to come out here and challenge PSA. Even though I am a huge PSA fan, all of my cards I have are graded by PSA. Even though I'm such a big PSA fan, a market always does good when there's a 1A and a 1B, and right now, unfortunately, there's just PSA and everybody else is scraping for the bottom of the barrel. So we shall see what happens in the future. Again, PSA is the big dog, but I'm hoping somebody comes and really challenges them. Now, speaking of the other grading companies, when you put all four of them together, there was almost 1.8 million cards graded last month, which is the biggest. That is a record month, going back all the way to May of 2024 when the previous record was set. So you think about that, May of 2024 wasn't that long ago. So the grading volume as a whole, the grading activity just in the hobby in general is upward and the right, and that's really exciting. Now, what really kind of just got me all kinds of fired up this month was last month we had talked about how strong the grading volume was at PSA in the TCG space. However, it was down year over year, but we put a big old asterisk next to that because we said, listen, last year in July, PSA opened up a brand new grading center in Japan, and that grading center just absolutely took off. There were all of these cards in Japan, these wonderfully minty cards of these awesome Pokemon in Japan that instead of having to come to California, now they could just be submitted there in their home country. Much less shipping, as you can imagine, quicker turnaround time, and we saw TCG volume spike. So I said, listen, the TCG volume last month was really good. However, we're going to be through this period where the year-over-year comps are going to be negative, and that's okay because we're going up against this incredible time period where we had a brand new grading center. But guess what happened this month? It didn't matter that it was month number 2 last year of that Japanese grading center being in existence, because PSA's TCG grading volume not only was up 24% month over month, which is an incredible strong number, crazy growth month over month, but it was also up 3% year over year, and that is what gets me so incredibly excited. Now, when you look at the other grading companies, again, some kind of mixed results here. So CGC is actually down 11% in the TCG space month over month, but it's up 60% year over year. CGC has a contract with a company where they do these mystery boxes, so that's where some of that's being driven from, but I also think that they're doing a good job in the hobby as a whole. SGC, excuse me, same thing, right? They're down 34% month over month. So overall, a very rough month in the TCG space for SGC, but year over year, they're up 18%. And then Beckett, poor Beckett, I say it every month and I just hate continuing to say it because I love Beckett so much. I have so many fond memories of it, but down 3% month over month, down 23% year over year. Beckett just can't seem to figure it out. But the big takeaway from slide number 1 is lots of excitement, lots of positive momentum in the grading space in the TCG world, and we should all feel very good about it. Now, as I said, we're going to look at the individual cards, the individual sets, and all of those things, but I gotta give my selfless plug because we put so much work into this video. If you like this type of data-driven approach, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, and if you have questions or comments, drop them down below. I appreciate it more than I can say if you do those 3 little things. Gives my small channel a little bit of a boost, and I really appreciate it. So with that out of the way, let's get into the meat and potatoes of what's driving all of these numbers, okay? So we always start off with the most graded sets, and it has been almost boring at the top for the last 6 to 8 months because it has been Japanese 151 and Pokemon 151, right? Just trading jabs, moving from 1 to 2 and 2 to 1. But at the end of the day, those two have obviously just been so incredibly popular with such high demand. They have been at the number 1 and number 2 spot. But what's starting to be interesting to me is the big gap between the total number of cards that have been graded between the 2 different languages. Now, Japanese 151 did come out first, so you would expect it to have a little bit of a lead, but the gap has been widening. So now there is 350,000 Japanese 151 cards that have been graded versus 157,000 English 150. So there's almost a 200,000 graded card gap between the 2 different languages, and I promise you the couple of months that separate when they were launched is not enough to make up a 200,000 card gap. Now, we all know that 151 in the English version is going through a restock right now, so maybe we'll see some big resurgence in it, but I don't think it's going to be enough to cover the gap between those 2. Now, you can also say English 151 had some really bad print quality, which might prevent a lot of people from sending them to PSA, so that could be it. There's a million different ways to look at it, but when I'm thinking about my collecting and investing future, I want those 151s which have a much lower overall population, which seems to be here in the English space. Now, when we talk about massive grading numbers, we always have to talk about V-Star Universe and Crown Zenith as well. Those are 2 incredibly deep sets, just like 151 is. All kinds of awesome cards, big name Pokemon, just a stunning set all around. But the grading volume is through the roof, right? When you look at Crown Zenith coming in with over 208,000 cards graded and more product hitting the shelves today, that is a huge number, and I'll be fascinated to see when that finally starts to slow down a little bit. And then when you look down below at V-Star Universe, coming up on 450,000 total cards graded for V-Star Universe. I mean, there's going to be 500,000 V-Star Universe cards graded, which is, you look at all of the other sets in that all-time graded slot right there. I mean, nobody's even close except for possibly Japanese 151 at 350,000. So it'll be very interesting to me to see which one of those sets, I don't know, a year from now ends up with the most cards graded. Another thing on here which I was excited about and should come as no surprise is, listen, Twilight Masquerade is up there, moving up to number 4. I love that an ultra-modern set in the Scarlet and Violet era is getting all kinds of love, all kinds of excitement. And the other thing that I thought was super cool is Evolving Skies has been on this 2 months in a row. So Evolving Skies is the best set from the Sword and Shield era, no arguments about that. The set list is super deep, just like Crown Zenith, all those awesome alt arts and the evolutions in there, just an incredible set. And to see it being that it's from from 2021, right? A 2021 set has been on this list in 2024, 2 months in a row is really exciting. And again, This list used to be dominated by Japanese sets, so it's really interesting to me that now we only have 2 Japanese sets and the market really has kind of rotated out of the Japanese space and back into the English, but don't be surprised if it rotates again. Things tend to be cyclical here in the Pokemon space, so this could be heavily dominated by English today, and it could very easily 6 months from now be dominated by Japanese again. So now that we've talked about the biggest sets, the individual cards, and oh my goodness, every time I do this video, I walk away thinking there's no way Pikachu with gray felt hat can be on this list again next month, and every month so far I have been wrong. Pikachu with gray felt hat, I don't know how many of them were printed, I don't know how deep the distribution was, but every month it seems like for the last 6 or 7 months Pikachu with gray felt hat has been at number 1, and look at the total grading volume for that card at almost 54,000 of that single card have been graded. Compared it to the rest of the cards on the list, I mean, what, you got the Magikarp, right, from Triple Beat. That's the next one, coming in at 25,600. You got the Ancient Mew, which, where did the Ancient Mew come from? The Ancient Mew just pops out of left field on this list, coming in at almost 40,000 cards graded. It is going to be interesting to me to see how high is for this Pikachu with gray felt hat, and to have an understanding of how, I mean, the card is still a $100 card raw. Like, how long will it be able to retain that value? Or is it just one of those really special cards where the volume doesn't matter? It's got an incredible story behind it. Obviously, Pikachu's super popular, and obviously the artwork is awesome, so that's one I'm going to keep a very close eye on. Another card that's at the top of this list that has been there for a long time is that 151 Charizard, obviously the chase card from 151. But what was interesting to me is the 2 and 3 cards. Both of them are the same one from English, one from Japanese, right? We just got done talking about, from a overall grading volume, the Japanese 151 set has about a 350,000 cards graded. The English 151 set has about 158,000 cards graded. But when you look at the Charizard chase card, there's almost 20,000 graded in the English variant and only 16,000 graded in the Japanese variant. So the ratio is flipped there, right? There's more English of those Charizard chase cards graded than the Japanese ones graded. And I think that's because the English one probably commands a little bit more dollars on the secondary market, which is why it's driving the overall grading volume up. But still, really cool to see. I think that's really interesting when you talk about the overall grading numbers versus obviously the chase card, at least here in the English variant right there. The other thing that I thought was really cool is you've got the Eevee from Twilight Masquerade. Now, it is on there both in English and Japanese. And when I think about that, to me, that just tells me that everybody's excited about that Eevee card, right? It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what language you prefer to collect. Like, both Japanese and English variants of that Eevee card are on here, which is incredibly exciting. And the other thing that I thought was really cool, and we just got done talking about this on a Scarlet and Violet video and also on a State of the Hobby video that we did, both of the chase cards from Paldean Fates in their English versions are on this list, and we have talked about Paldean Fates, I think, has the opportunity to do something really special. The Charizard is awesome, and that Bubble Mew is so unique, really cool. Seeing both of those cards here on this list are very, very exciting. So we've talked about the biggest sets, we've talked about the biggest cards. Now we gotta talk about the overall categories, and this is why I got so excited when I pulled this graph together. I said, okay, things are starting to change, and they're changing for the positive in the TCG space. Now, if you look at the graph on the left, you have the orange line, which represents what I call the ball sports. So you got baseball, basketball, and football, right? The 3 big sports, at least here where I live in America, and I kind of lumped them into one because I've always had this theory that TCG grading volume is going to overtake those 3 ball sports, because I think TCG in the future has the opportunity to be more popular, appeal to a wider audience, not just here in the US, but globally. So that's kind of where my mind has been out ever since I started this graph all the way back in December of 2022. And as you can see, for most of the time, they've been kind of trading back and forth. The blue and orange lines have been really close. No matter what was going on in the hobby, they were really close. And then in 2024, they absolutely diverged, right? You saw ball sports take off, and you saw Pokemon TCG come down. Now, last month, we at least saw them move in the right direction together. Both of them were up, but they moved in lockstep. And then this month is where we really start to see that gap close, right? Ball sports is essentially flat month over month, and the TCG volume shot up, right? It's up 26% versus last month, which is incredibly exciting to see. Now, I do think that that's interesting because one would expect a lot of momentum in the football space because football season's just about to kick off, and you do see a pretty good jump there in the football space, but it's going to be interesting to me to see if the gap starts to close, because that is what I've kind of been hypothesizing for a long time, for years here. I do think that overall 5, 10, 15 years from now, I do think that the TCG space has the opportunity to become much bigger and just a bigger player in the overall card space than the ball sports do. Now, the next one right here that we look at is the most graded subjects, and this can be a little bit of a boring list, but there are some interesting takeaways. First off, it gets lost in the sauce a little bit that these are TCG numbers. These are not just Pokemon numbers that we're pulling from PSA, but because Pokemon is so far and away above all the other TCGs, Pokemon are the only cards and sets and characters to show up. But Monkey D. Luffy, they're from One Piece, has been on this list for the last 6 months, and I'm excited because Monkey had a very strong month over month. If you remember last month, Monkey had a very weak month. He was down about 30%, but this month he's up about 30%, so that's good. I think I enjoy that there are other TCGs that people are excited about and people are getting graded, and it just makes me feel good about the space overall. But one of my big takeaways from this, right, we talked about how strong the grading has been in the month of August in TCG and in Pokemon. We've seen all these numbers in the black and everything going up. What was interesting to me is Charizard and Pikachu, which are always 1 and 2 here at the top of this list, both of their grading volume is down and down pretty significantly month over month. So if you see the grading volume in August versus July for Charizard as a whole, that's all of the Charizard cards graded, is down 26%, and Pikachu is down 11%. Now, that might give you some pause, but that gives me excitement, right? That tells me that those two big names, even though they are down double digits and Charizard's, Charizard's down 26%, right? But even though those two biggest names in the Pokemon space are down significantly and overall TCG grading volume is up, that tells me people are finding so much excitement in other cards of other characters that we don't hear about all the time. And I think that's critically important, for the TCG space to reach full potential in the long run. So seeing these two down month over month like that doesn't give me pause. It gives me excitement because that says that other characters are making it up. I mean, look at Mew, look at Umbreon, right? Mew is up 16% versus last month. Umbreon's up 26%. Mewtwo's down 14%, but Eevee's getting a bump because of the Twilight Masquerade, and Ray Ray's up 20%. Giratina pops on the list, right? Like, there's a lot of really exciting takeaways from this, and again, that's my big takeaway from this is the two biggies. Yes, they're down month over month, but overall the hobby's up significantly, so there must be a whole lot of other cards that people are finding value in and getting them graded. Next one right here, gem rate by era, and I always tell everybody take this with a big grain of salt. Don't let this drive your decision on what you're going to grade with or who you're going to get your cards graded by or anything like that. But what was interesting to me was we have seen last month, we saw in the ultra modern TCG space, so you'll see the set era, you'll see the 2020s, we saw that number jump. We saw the gem rate jump really universally across all the different brands, and what I was interested to see was if that jump maintained, and it did. We didn't see a big jump up this month or down. It seems to be really flat. So for example, PSA, TCG in the 2020s, the gem rate there is 68.6%, and that's relatively flat compared to where it was last month, which is good because we all know the beginning of Scarlet and Violet had some very questionable print quality. So now we're seeing that number tick up. This is what I think we should expect to see in Scarlet and Violet sets moving forward. Very exciting, very, very exciting. And that was my big takeaway. So I was happy to see that this was able to maintain month over month. Now, this one right here is what I'm all kinds of excited about. This slide and the next one. So this is specifically TCG cards graded at PSA by month, all the way going back to January of 2022. And you'll see that I was comparing July to August. So when we start with these three red boxes on the left, that is July to August of 2022. And guess what? The grading volume from July till August of 2022 was down. And then in 2023, you'll see that huge spike right there in July, right? You see that's what happened. And July to August was up, but not up a ton. It was only up 3.5% because it was up against a very big July. We talked about that new grading center being open. Cards were flooded in, so the grading volume was up versus July, but it was only up 3.5%. And now this year, now we did have a really low jumping off point. As I said, look at that blue line going from December of 2023. It has been working its way down all of 2024, but July was up 1st June, and then August is up 1st July, so that's very exciting. And not only that, it's up significantly, right? August to July is up 26%, which is incredibly, it's very telling to me. I think we're turning a corner. We have so much exciting things going on here in the Pokemon space. We've got some new sets that are dropping. I think the Twilight Masquerade has done a lot to bring a lot of excitement back, and so we're starting to see this throughput again in the grading space. And what I thought was interesting too, if you look back in August of 2022, right, that was the end of the Sword and Shield era. Like, we were 1 month away from having Lost Origin being dropped. We've already had Brilliant Stars that had dropped. Evolving Skies was a year old, so you would expect at that point, we all knew Evolving Skies was going to be something special, right? We all knew that those cards, those alt arts, were going to be on a whole different level. So even with all of that being known, we still saw relatively low grading volume. And then August of 2023 was the start of Scarlet and Violet. Not a lot of excitement at the start of an era. And then here we are in the mid of 2024, where we've got the middle of the Scarlet and Violet era. And it's interesting. Now, I always say this, more grading isn't good. It's not bad, but for me, it's just an overall sign of hobby engagement. So I love when I see graphs like this. And the final slide that we talk about all the time is just this holistic graph of all of the grading at PSA, because a strong card market is good for us. It doesn't matter if baseball's hot, basketball's hot, football's hot, TCG is hot, hockey is hot, soccer is hot. Like, just the card market as a whole being hot is going to be good for all of us in the long run. I promise you that. And my favorite thing about this that I clipped out is seeing that big call out at the very top. PSA grading activity sets new record thanks to TCG resurgence. This whole video has been about TCG resurgence, and we'll have to see if it holds on for another month, because hey, 2 months in a row is not enough to say that we're officially in a new trend. But if we get 3 months under our belts, I think we're in really, really good shape. So the overall momentum in the hobby is great, right? We did our State of the Hobby video not long ago, and we saw that Sword and Shield, was starting to find some support lines. We saw that Sun and Moon was in a really good spot. Those singles cards are going up. We saw the XY era. Those cards are going up. We see that a lot of the Scarlet and Violet sets, compared to how some of the original Sword and Shield sets started out, they're performing really, really well. We're in a very special time right now, and plus we have so many awesome sets on the horizon. Like, we are in a good space, I promise you, overall, from a Pokemon collecting and investing hobby. So if you made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed this really long, data-heavy approach, hit that subscribe button, because we do fun stuff like this all the time, although it's not always this long. And if you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. And if you have questions or comments, drop them down below. I hope you had an epic one. I appreciate you more than I can say, and I'll talk to you later. See you, everybody. Bye.